think we'll, if anybody has to leave, you can leave whenever you want. But you'll probably go for about 40 minutes.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, that's fine. So we'll start in.
You know what you can do? 5 minutes before you can motion.
What was it again?
Okay?
Okay.
Right, we need that.
And I can
I'll give you a sign.
say something to let me know that I have 5 minutes left.
Okay. Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
Joel is live.
We should start or
Awesome.
not.
Oh. It says like Joel's live FJ because that's what I typed in.
Okay, great.
Right. Okay, people are on now.
Do I have to look in the camera?
No, whatever you want.
Whatever I want.
Whatever you want. Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Questions? Yeah, maybe. Questions? If I turn it on the side, does it go sideways? Okay.
Okay, if I have to wait, I'll sit down.
Yeah. You manage the pen? Do you manage the pen?
There's a step down later.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, maybe we'll just take shifts.
So I hear she is following you, or you're going to below. She's not connected. Following is following. Following is following.
That's the plan.
That's his plan.
I think that
David
it's not fair
is
to
the
the people that
computer
make
natural,
mistakes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe I'll start speaking and then.
Because it's not fair to people
Yeah.
that have
Why
other
are they
plans.
here?
I don't know, they're not answered, but it's not fair to people who have plans that are.
Yeah. So I have just a couple things to say, and then by the time I finish. So I just want to thank everyone for coming today. I know that it's hard with finals, but I thought that it was important to have an event today on Yom HaShoah. I usually like to speak off the cuff, but I just wanted to prepare something. Because as I sat down to prepare something to say for this introduction, I was really at a loss for words. I've learned a lot about the Holocaust my entire life. I've met so many survivors. I've participated every year in Holocaust memorials. I've been to a number of Holocaust museums, and I've even been to Poland and seen the camps, the mass graves, and the remnants of the Jewish communities that existed before the Holocaust. And I still could not find the right words. Today is Yom HaShoah B'Gvura, Israel's National Memorial Day for the Holocaust. In Israel, at 10 o'clock in the morning, air raid sirens went off throughout the country, and every single person paused for a moment of silence. Professionals stand in their offices, children stand at their desks, and cars and trucks pull over on the side of the highway while drivers get out of their vehicles. If you haven't seen it, it's a really powerful thing to watch. I recommend that you YouTube it. For 1 minute, the entire country stands in silence. Sometimes it's impossible to put one's feelings into words, and therefore silence is necessary. That being said, a lot of time has passed since the Holocaust, and sometimes it feels like the world is starting to move on. In the past few years, a number of world leaders have disassociated the Jews from the Holocaust, while global anti-Semitism has reached a dangerously high level. At the same time, other governments have started their own Holocausts, and new groups that spew hate and commit terror like the Nazis have emerged. The world is changing, and therefore staying silent is not enough, even when it's hard to find the right words. Which is why I now focus on the second half of today's Memorial Day, the Hagvura. Gvura in Hebrew means heroism. Today is not just Holocaust Remembrance Day, but also Heroism Remembrance Day. And I think the two aspects of the day go hand in hand. When we are able to learn from the stories of heroes, we are inspired to fight the evil that exists in the world and to work to ensure that something like the Holocaust never happens again. There has never been a more important time in history to learn and remember the stories of survivors, and my great-uncle, Leo Slawin, is one of the greatest heroes I've ever met. As he was about to tell you, together with my grandmother and their parents, Leo survived the Holocaust and was able to start a new life in America. Uncle Leo settled here in New York, and my grandmother settled in Toronto, Canada. Between the two of them, they built a family of over 100 in children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. We are so fortunate to have him speak to us today, and it is an honor to introduce to you all Uncle Leo.
Hello, good evening. For most of the 55 years that have occurred since those tragic events that happened in Poland, I was not able to bring up the events loudly to myself or to our people. I was not able to talk about it. It was locked in inside of me. I couldn't bear to mention anything. Gradually, I began to realize, and I've had help about it, which I will explain to you later. I realized that I must tell my story so that the younger generations will be able to learn of what happened to us and to my people. So we wound up in 1941 when the German army marched into our town in June, the end of June. We had a peaceful existence up to now. My town is called Dunilowicze, and it's located northeast of Poland, not far from Russia. We had about 900 Jewish people and 2,000 Gentiles. It was a small town, and we lived a peaceful life. We went to synagogue on Saturday. On a Friday, we had a great preparation for the Shabbos. We had 3 synagogues in town, and all 3 of them were Orthodox. We had a rabbi, a rebbe. We had a Yiddish school. The most Jewish students were attending, and we had a tabut. Those people who came to learn Hebrew to make aliyah into Israel. We also had a doctor and a pharmacist to attend to our illnesses. For instance, I once got sick and I developed an infection under my jaw, and I had a swelling, and I had a very big problem, and it kept getting bigger, and the doctor was helpless. Finally, my grandmother's lady, who gossips a lot, decided that we should use compression from Zeumen, compression from flax seeds. And I was not able to eat, and everybody thought that I was already going to die. My grandfather tried to give me a zloty for each swallow of food that I was taking. He collected a whole bag of zlotas. Anyway, when my infection started dissolving from the compression from Zeumen, and I recovered, everybody was happy, and my grandfather came up to me and he wanted to borrow the money that he collected for me, and I gave it to him. And so we had our fun times. We had poor people coming to, we had, I didn't mention yet that we own a store, the second largest store in town, and we had frequently poor people coming into our store, and I remember one lady around 15 years old used to come into our store with a little bag on her shoulders, and she would say to my father, "Gib mir zu kochenem Hering." please give me a shriveled herring. She was afraid to ask for a healthy herring. So my father, when he hesitated, he used to say, she said to him, "Chotzona kop." And my father used to dip his hands into the barrel and get her a few herrings, and she would always go happily after. Anyway, in the summer we used to go swimming. We had a place where we go swimming. Once we passed a field of carrots. I asked my father, "How many zimmersen do you make from so many carrots?" And we had a lot of fun. So we lived peacefully, and then all of a sudden, as I mentioned before, the Nazis came to our town. Once they came to our town, they started issuing orders. They were attaching them to the doors of the place, of the houses and of the merchants. And the first order was that we could not walk on the sidewalks. The Jews are not allowed to walk on sidewalks. Then the Jews were supposed to wear yellow stars of David in front and in the back. Jews were not allowed to have any major property. They confiscated whatever they could, livestock or other properties that we had. They were confiscating. All the able-bodied people had to go to work for the Nazis, so to on the fields, and so forth and so forth. And in order to show the Jews that they have no power, they went to a recluse, to a poor man who lived by himself. His name was Yudke, and they knocked on his door. They told him to get dressed, and they walked him to the cemetery, and they made him dig a grave for himself, and then they shot him. This is the way the Jewish people felt that this is to show an example that they can do whatever they want with the Jews. The Belarusian police, the Polish police, joined with the Nazis to help in the execution of their orders. And Judenrat was formed, and they were asking the Judenrat to provide Jews for whatever they needed. One day, the Judenrat came to my house, and they took away my father and about 15 to 20 other men, because the police wanted to have fun. And when my father came back in the middle of the night with blue marks on his chest, and he could barely breathe, and we nursed him. We had to go to the ice house to get some ice to revive him, and we nursed him for 2 weeks, and finally he got better. In the ghetto, very soon after that, they ordered all the Jews to move into a small street called the Gessele. The Gessele was just one side, one border was a lake, and the other border was, then they had 2 gates, and all the Jews from the entire town had to get into the Gessele, and locked up in the gate, and they could only walk out through the 2 gates. And the people had to go to work in the ghetto, and we got rations. And my parents, or all the Jewish people, sometimes My father used to take some valuable gold pieces, some rings, and try to exchange for butter or for cheese. And he would bring a piece home and he would divide it into 4. And he would say, each of you gets 1/4 of what I got. And he says, you can eat it in 1 day or you can eat it in 5 days or until I get another something for us. So we tried to subsist the best we could, and we tried to make ourselves busy. The rabbi proclaimed we should pray more. He proclaimed that every day we should say Avinu Malkeinu instead of holidays that Avinu Malkeinu was supposed to say. We should say, and we should ask God for redemption. My grandfather used to take me, and we would bench the Lebona, and my grandfather would say to me, if you bench the Lebona every month, then no evil will occur to you. And I listened to him, and we tried to bench the Lebona, we tried to occupy ourselves the best we can. Then in 1942, in the summer of 1942, we started hearing that the sister towns around Dunilowicze, Poland had a lot of little towns, thousands of them. And we started hearing that the sister town, Dokshitz, where my father was born and he was raised up there. We had a family there. They started to liquidate the Jews from those towns. So he says to me, and he says to us, we have to try to save ourselves. They're going to come to us soon, and they're going to liquidate the town the same way they're liquidating the other towns. So on our property in the ghetto, where the Gentile house was a shed. So we decided, my father and I and my mother quietly, we decided to dig a hole in the shack. We moved into the shack and we spread out the old furniture that we had there. And we started digging a hole every night. We would run for 2 hours and we would dig a hole. We dug a 6-foot hole, 8 by 8 by 4, by 8 by 5, and by 6, I think 6 feet deep. And we covered the ceiling with dirt. And for an entrance of the hole, we filled the dirt in a drawer of a table drawer, and we filled the sand, and we would cover it up, and so that it wouldn't be noticeable. And it said, just in case the time will come for the Jews to be killed, we'll run away, not because we want to save ourselves, but because we want to avoid the confrontation, to march to death. So one Saturday morning, it was November 21st, 1942. We know it was a Saturday because we rested the night before. We heard shots, and also we realized later that the Germans like to kill the Jews on their holidays when they are least prepared. So we heard shots. We ran out into the yard, and there were shadows on the lake. The lake was frozen, and some Jews were trying to escape through the lake. We heard shots, and we didn't know what to do. So my father said, let's run to the hole. My grandparents, we lived in the house with my mother's parents, Zaidi Irmo and baby Bulegeshe. And we ran out. My mother ran over to them and said, "We have to go to the hall. Let's go. We don't have time. We must run to the hall." So my grandparents said to us, to my mother, "Please let us meet our fate on our own. We are too old to worry about saving ourselves. We're going to meet the fate as it will happen." And they wouldn't run to the hall. So my father started yelling, "Come on, we don't have enough time to discuss it. Please, let's get out." So the four of us, my mother and my father and my sister Basia, we ran into the hall. And we covered the hall up with some dirt. And we sat there. We didn't know what was happening with the Jews. We knew what was happening, but we didn't hear anything. So when we were sitting in there, towards the evening, my mother and my father realized that in their haste to run into the hall, they forgot to take any water or any bread. So my mother went opened up the exit and the entrance for the hall, and she looked around from side to side. She saw a house on fire, but she didn't see any people there. So she crawled out of the house, and she crawled she crawled out of the hole, and she ran into the house, and she fetched a loaf of bread and a half a pail of water. And she crawled with those items back to the hall, and we closed the hall. While we were sitting in the hall, one day, we think it was on the third day, we smelled smoke, and we heard the hissing sound, and earth-shattering cries, children's cries, women cries, and men's screams, and then shots fired. And we surmised that the people, we knew that certain people have created double walls, and they were hiding in those walls. We decided that one of those probably walls was discovered, and it was called a schron, a secret compartment, and they were eliminated and they were shot to pieces. So my father says, we can't sit in the hall any longer. We must try to get out because they're going to discover us and they're going to kill us. So we tried to get out the next day, but the next day was a beautiful night. The next time was a beautiful night, and the moon was shining. And my father looked around and he says, "You can see a mile." He says, "You can't go out this night because if you go out, they will discover you and they'll catch you." So he waited for another night. So the next night was a stormy night. We think it was Wednesday night. It was a stormy night. The wind was howling, and it was really a very thunderous night. So he decided that this is a good night for us to leave. So we got out of the hall one by one. My father first, my sister and I, and my mother last, and we helped each other through the wires of the border of the ghetto, and we slid down a little mountain, and we came to our property where we used to have a horse, and we came to our property. Our property was alongside the river, and we decided we're going to have to run alongside the river. So we went through our property, and we had to be very careful because the pieces around the river were dried up, and every time you step on it, they were creating a noise. So we each had to be very careful how we were stepping. And then, as we were walking along the river, we had to bypass the bridge. So the bridge was a main thoroughfare that used to come from Vilna bus used to come, and we couldn't pass it over the bridge, but we wanted to pass it under the bridge. But we saw a guard with a rifle walking back and forth. So when the guard went away from us, we ran under the bridge alongside the river. As we were running along the river, about 100 yards from the bridge, there was a Jewish house that was empty when they went to the ghetto, and a Gentile family moved in. We didn't know about that. It seemed like it was nobody there. But we were passing by the side, the stoop of the house, and a dog started barking inside the house, and the woman ran out of the house, and she started yelling, "Policja, Żydzi uciekają!" Police, Jews are escaping. So my mother recognized her as our neighbor, Prokopowicz. So she ran up to her and she said, "Mrs. Prokopowicz, to jest Slawin, to jest Slawin. We were your neighbors, the Slavins." We knew them. They had a goat, and they were just a single couple. They were around 50, 60 years old, and they had no children. But she kept yelling, and we thought it was the end right then and there. But miraculously, we heard the shouts, but the policeman on the bridge didn't hear it because the wind was blowing in our direction. So we can hear the sounds, but he couldn't hear anything because no shots were fired. And my father said, because he previously told us if we lose ourselves, we should go to the place where we used to go bathing. So we started running. My father says, "Run." So we ran all to the bathing place where we used to bathe, and no shots were fired. And we survived this episode. And if you believe in divine intervention, you have it right there. We were saved again. And as we were gathering ourselves, we looked up in the sky and we saw the daylight was breaking. So we said we have to disappear, we cannot stay there. So my mother suddenly thought that she knew a farmer that used to come to the store that she used to borrow money from her. And she knew where exactly his farm was. So we dashed to this farm, we knocked at the door, and we asked him to hide us. He was scared because if you hide the Jew, you can execute it yourself. So he quickly took us to his barn, and he says, "If they find you there, I'm going to say that I don't know anything about it, that you went in by yourself." Anyway, he kept us during the day, and the next night he gave us food, and he says there are too many policemen that are passing this area, and I'm afraid and they will discover you and us, and we'll all get killed. So he suggested that we go someplace else. So my mother had some people, I forgot to tell you, I have to digress a little bit. On Tuesdays was a market day in Dunilowicze. The farmers used to bring their products that they used to have, eggs, cheese, and anything, chickens that it came, they used to sell it. And my grandfather was before he moved to Dunilowicze, used to live in a little village, Sloboda, and he knew some people there. So the farmers used to come into his house, and my grandmother would make him tea, and she was very helpful to them. And one farmer was very friendly. His name was Anishkewicz, and he lived in a village called Zosina. So my mother thought of that farm, It was about 10 miles from the city in a wooded area. And she said she decided that she's going to head for that area to trying to find which one is his farm. So we went, we walked, the four of us. My mother was first. My mother was first. I was third. My sister was second. And my father, he acquired lapses, special shoes made out of cord, that are very big, that covers the footprints of one in the snow, that covered so that they wouldn't know how many people were walking. So we walked like this one night, and we slept in a bed house, and we used to knock at the door and ask for people to give us some bread. And at the same time, my mother kept asking the person, who lives in there? Who lives there? Who lives in that place? Who lives in this place? Anyway, we walked around for about 2 weeks like that, until one day a person said, in this place lives Anishkewicz. So my mother knew who lives in that house. So she went to that house, so she finally knocked on the door, and she went to the house, and she told her who she is, and Mrs. Anishkewicz, Selina, recognized her because she knows her also from the marketplace. So she took us into the house, and she bemoaned the fact of the Jews, and she cooked us a meal of hot soup. And my mother looked around and she says, wait a minute, where is your husband? So she told her a tragic story about the husband. The husband, about a year ago, felt a noise outside of the farm. So he thought that the calf ran away from the barn. So he went outside, he opened the door, and he tried to catch the calf. It turns out that the calf was a wolf. And the wolf bit him, and he got rabies, and he died. So they were poor because the men couldn't work on the fields. Their family consisted the mother, Selina, and two daughters, Vanda and Bolesia, and a son, Yusik. Son Yusik was already married somewhere else, but Vanda and Bolesia, they were 18 and 16. Vanda was 18 and Bolesia was 16. And they said, we don't have any subsistence ourselves. So my father gave him a plan. And there's another digression. Before we went to the ghetto, my father used to deal with the Catholic priest of the town. And he called in the priest, and he said to the priest, take whatever you want, get whatever you can out. Maybe you we had a sewing machine, a foot sewing machine, and we had grain of all kinds, and they picked up a couple of sleds of stuff, and they took it away before the ghetto. So my father says, I will send you to the priest, to Vanda, because she's the older one. I will send a note to the priest so that you can get something, and it will help you to subsist. And because they didn't have anything much to eat, they were starving themselves. So Vanda went, took a horse from Yusik. Yusik gave her a horse, and took a sled with the horse, and went with a note to the priest in Dunilowicze. She went to the priest, she went into a private room to the priest, and she handed him the note for my father. As Vanda tells us, that the priest got white. Dealing with Jews means death. It was very dangerous. but he didn't say a word. He just told the lieutenant, the adjutant, the guy who was working for him, fill up whatever this lady wants. But she took back the sewing machine, she took back a full sled of stuff, of grain, and she took it back, and now they were happy because then they knew they can subsist the whole winter. So they brought the stuff home, and in addition to that, they also started knitting. My sister was a very good knitter, so my mother was knitting, and I was knitting. We were exchanging knitting stuff for tomatoes, potatoes, anything we could. So what happened was that pretty soon they started the rumor that they are hiding Jews because they were coming too often. They had to make flour from the grain, and the flour was supposed to be done by hand. So the grain place, the flour place, where they created the flour, they were frequently coming too often. For 3 people, they were coming too often. They must be hiding Jews. So they started the rumor, and we started eating less grain and more potatoes, and we did whatever we could. And with the winter of 1942 was the worst winter for the Jews. On top of everything else, the Gentiles were thinking that the Reich, the German Third Reich, is going to live for 1,000 years. They occupied almost the entire section of East Russia up to Moscow, including Leningrad, including the entire European. England was almost ready to fall. America was trying to help out with the Lend-Lease program, where they were lending machinery and to Russia for free, and to England airplanes. Anyways, so for us it was the hardest part. For Jews, hiding Jews was very, very dangerous, because they were trying to, there were instances that 2 Jews were caught, and they were going to be given up to the German police, but the other 2 Jews of the group of 4 ran away, so they were worried and they let them go. So we had to be very careful. Anyways, it became very dangerous. So in 1943, the beginning of spring, it wasn't really spring, but in February, in March, we started thinking of leaving the place because they were really anxious that we go. So while we went to the woods, so we went to the woods, and we had to build a little shack and sit up there. But at the same time, somebody found a leaflet written in Belarus, and it said that the German army of 285,000 that ran by the General Paulus around Stalingrad was surrounded and was taking prisoners by the Russians. And after that, the Russians are going to win the war, and America and England are going to win the war, the triumvirate, so that we should be able to mobilize. The bulletin urged the people to mobilize, to catch weapons and start fighting from within, because they are coming back. So the people, the Gentiles, who were originally anti-Semitic and are trying to catch Jews, they started thinking second thoughts about doing that. So in the summer of 43, things got better. We were sitting in the woods, and we didn't know what to do, but on the front line, the submarines, the German subs were being killed, decimated, and we heard partisans started coming to us, and the partisans were saying, were listening to radios, and they were listening to the good part of the fact that the Germans are getting defeated in various areas of the globe, and that they're going to be coming back. So, but we still had the Germans, and we still had to worry. And as the autumn was approaching, we heard that a German division was being sent into the area to fight with the partisans, to get rid of the partisans. So we were worried about them, and we finally got a guy. We met another group of people in the end of the summer by the name of Chechone, and he was a merchant of the woods, and he knew the area, and he says he's going to take us to an area where we don't encounter anybody. So we were able to run away from the surrounding area and go to another area and hide there. And anyways, we managed to survive call it the surrounding areas where the Germans were fighting the partisans. And we came back to dear Zosina, and we didn't know what to do. This was a late autumn of 1943. Then it's the next year. So we were sitting in the woods, and we were trying to figure out how we can manage the winter of 43, 44. So in the middle of, all of a sudden, we see a man around 60 years old come into the woods, walk over to our place where we kept the water, take the water and dozed off the fire where we kept warm, and he says, "Come, you're coming with me." And his name was Ivan Krivenki. He took us to his house, and he only had half a house, and he kept us in his house for the winter of 42, 43. I mean, 43, 44. So the next winter we spent in the house of Krivenki, and we met many partisans, and they were coming and they were telling us about the battles that were occurring, and they were saying that soon the Russians are going to come back. So we stayed in the house and until 44, and we were getting ready. In 1944, the Russians attacked, and then they beat the German army in Russia, and we were able to escape the returning Germans, and we survived. And we were liberated in 44. I think it's in August 44 we were liberated, and that's our story. We were able to leave our town because they had a law that said if you are a Polish citizen, you can leave Russia and you can go to the West. So we left Russia, and because under Stalin nobody was safe. We knew that he could pick up anybody, and so we went to lodge. We met some, they call it Sheris Haplita. We met some remnants of survivors, and then we were able to get to Berlin, to the western sector of Berlin, and eventually to Munich. And there where we registered, because we had relatives in the United States. In Brooklyn, we had cousins who were willing to sign for us. So we went to a displaced persons camp, and my sister had to be separated because she got married right after the liberation. And if you get married, you cannot be online it's called the CIC, Counterintelligence Corps, to see if you're not a communist. So they had to take her out of the line. So she went to Paris, and there she had to go. When my mother, she had to wait in Paris for a little longer. My mother had to go to Toronto, and as it turned out, Gloria's parents signed for my sister, and they were able to go to Canada, and we established a family in Canada, and the rest is stories. I just want to tell you one other thing. My dad, in 1988, passed away, and before he passed away, he was sick. I came to his hospital room, and he said to me, "Don't worry for me, we are the ones who cheated Hitler. We have a family that's growing, and Hitler tried to eliminate us, and he didn't succeed. And so I should be at peace with myself." I just have one thing that I have to say. I felt at peace with the fact that the Nazis' Third Reich was finally defeated, and that the perpetrators of such evil have met their just end. From the original 4 survivors, my parents, my sister, Basia, and I, has sprung a family of over 70, and you heard Joel say over 100, so it's more than 70 now. So we were able, I cannot read. All right, anyway, you know what I mean. We are proof that the German war machine failed in its devil's work. And so the other thing that I still didn't mention it, how I got to talk about it. In 1999, there's a foundation, Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. She contacted us, and she said that my sister, Basia, gave her name to Yad Vashem and registered her as a righteous Jew. And we need people like you to come to the Vault of Astoria to tell your story. And so they need some money that we have a fundraiser. So in 1999, the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous persuaded me to start writing, to start telling people what happened to us. And I loosened up, and I was talking ever since. So that's my story.
They put Salinas and the Ashkenazi, the Ashken family, they put them as the righteous Jews. They were the one that the foundation. The foundation was honoring.
Yeah, they were honoring the family.
That's why they contacted you.
They were honoring the family, and Vanda came, and we had.
And you were reunited with them.
We were reunited with Vanda for the first time. My sister went to Minsk before that, but I didn't go with her that time. It was too dangerous. So that's my story. I went to Minsk to visit. Am I doing okay?
Yeah.
All right.
2006.
When we were doing, when we went to Minsk, my son Kevin said to us, "Dad, do you want to go and visit your place where you escaped?" So in 2006, he and Brenda, my daughter Brenda, and I and Gloria, who else? Just the 4 of us went to Minsk. We went through from Minsk, we went to Dunilowicze. We also stopped in Dokshice, where my aunt and my two uncles, their families were murdered, and we stopped at, there were 4,300 Jews in Dokshice, and we stopped at that monument, and then we went to Dunilowicze, and we saw our house. I have something about my house. I have a picture of my house. I have a picture of Selina. I'll pass it around to you. And we went through the place where the girl jumped on the steps and started screaming, "Jews are escaping." We went to the bridge, and we went to the place where the place where oh, I forgot one item. I forgot to tell you. When we got out from the Selina's house, we went to the woods. We met up with 4 people. One of them was called Moshe Cepelewicz, and Moshe Cepelewicz tells us the story of what happened to the people who were left behind when we went to the hall. Moshe wound up with all the Jews of Dunilowicze in the barn, in a barn in the middle of the ghetto, and an assessment stood on a hill, and they were opening the door, and as they opened the door, they were pushing each person one by one to the middle of the field, and he would shoot at them and kill them, and then the next one would go out a whole day. He couldn't wait because his little boy started crying, and he couldn't wait. He got crazed up. He got so crazy, he opened the door himself, he ran out, and he started falling, and the assessment shot at him, and he caught his ear, and the blood appeared on his face. He fell on the floor, and he pretended to be dead, and the whole day they were executing everybody one by one, and at night he shook everything off, and he ran away across the door, across the lake. And so that's his story, and that's how we know what happened to the Jews in Dunilowicze. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If there are any questions, I think Julio is going to answer them. Can you take a question of him? Did she ask a question?
He will,
Yeah?
but she'll have to speak
Yeah.
loudly.
Did you and your family know what was going on while you were in hiding?
Did you and your family know what was going on while you were in hiding? Were you aware of what was going on?
Not as much as we knew after. We knew something was bad because we knew that Hitler didn't sit around, but we didn't know the details too much. We didn't know. They didn't popularize it. It wasn't popular at that time. The Jews were just, there wasn't Israel. So they weren't really take that much care, you know. Jews just another minority.
Did you have any idea what the American Jewry, how much they knew about what was going on?
What?
Were you aware of what American Jewry knew about the war? Were you aware?
No, I wasn't aware at all of anything. I just read that they weren't that interested. I just read recently, there was a book that came out that the American Jews were not that interested. There was some concern, but lukewarm.
If that.
If that. He agrees with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Julio, for speaking, and thank you all for coming.
I just want to say that the story that he told now, I'm Kevin. This is my my father, Leo. I just want everybody to know that the story that he told, he actually wrote, and we posted it online at slawin.com. There's a number of photographs illustrating some of the things that he said when we took our 2 trips to Minsk and Dunilowicze. So, and I think we'll post this video too, so if you want to come back and look at some photos or read a little bit more about it, you can go to slawin.com, or if you want to see the video. And it could be a resource to keep the story alive, the remarkable story that my father just told.
He also has papers if anybody wants.
I just want to show Vanta. Okay. Selena and Bolesia. You pass it along.
These are the,
This is Selena and Bolesia on the right side.
these are pictures that were sent after the war.
If they want to see,
Here. He has like a small little, you can just take one hand around. It's just kind of like a concise little synopsis of what he was saying.
Thank you.